Hello class, my name is Tommy DeYoung and today I will be presenting my intelligence collection plan of Iran's nuclear weapons program. So, to move on and start off with my agenda, I will be presenting a intelligence summary of the current Iran nuclear program based on reports received by the intelligence community. I will then move into the 5 stages of my intelligence collection process, which will be receive and analyze requirements, determine resource availability and capability, tasking of resources, evaluating reporting, and in conclusion, update collection planning. So, in regards to the intelligence summary, or INSUM, there have been reports of increased relations of Russia, China, and North Korea with Iran. Iran has reportedly acquired one nuclear missile capable of launching 2,500 miles. And there are also reports of clandestine nuclear technology and weapons development occurring within Iran's borders. And lastly, nuclear weapons testing plans are currently underway for later this year in September. So, bottom line, what nuclear capabilities does Iran have? So, in the first stage of the collection plan, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence has pushed out their intelligence requirements in regards to the future of Iran's nuclear weapon programs. So you would receive and analyze these requirements, and in order to do so, you would compare it to previous taskings, and you will determine that, in my recommendation, a task force is required to achieve this mission and meet these requirements. So you'll consult the national intelligence strategy, the national security strategy, and the commander in chief's intent for Iran, and you'll cross-reference this with intelligence from all the intelligence agencies to include the FBI, Department of State, NSA, NGA, CIA, DIA, and the NRO and NSA, if I didn't already previously mention that. So you'll fuse all the intelligence from those agencies in order to, and the intelligence will need to be relevant to the mission at hand. All the previously known reports of Iran and their nuclear weapons development programs in order to develop a good background and foundation for the collection process. And you'll also identify requirements for utilizing nuclear missiles for Iran. And all of this will come together into one big pool and push out the intelligence requirements, which will identify the scope of the task at hand and tie back to the original mission and the requirements of the Director of National Intelligence. So, the second stage is going to be determining resource availability and capability. So I broke this down into different layers. The first layer being the logistics footprint, where we're going to want to identify the number of intelligence systems available for each agency, and that includes their assets as well, the operational time and range of their capabilities, the requirements for utilizing certain assets, the maintenance of certain technical systems, and also their frequency of how often a particular asset for each agency can be used. We don't want to overuse our assets and then they become non-mission capable. We also want to identify the cost per unit. So pretty much aside from the costs of acquisition and maintenance, we also want to identify contract costs because we're going to get contractor support along with budgeting for each individual asset or system as well. On top of that, operational availability. So I already talked about collection time. We'll also want to factor in collection downtime, such as delays, and want to identify different areas of collection for named areas of interest within Iran. Moving into that, we'll also move into the reliability. That's going to part of the strategy is setting up different requirements that will meet what will meet, in my opinion, performance standards for each agency that is a part of the task force in order to make sure we're meeting those requirements. And lastly, collection time, which is going to be the most important part of the resource availability and collect capability. Can't Can we run this particular asset 24/7? Does this particular asset need 12 hours to recover, etc., etc.? That way we can identify a strategic sync matrix and reduce any levels of redundancy across the task force. So moving into the third stage, that's going to go into the tasking of resources. I broke this down into multiple 5 primary intelligence disciplines, being OSINT, GEOINT, Human, SIGINT, and MASINT. OSINT will be directed by the CIA and supported by the FBI and Department of State. Their outputs will include nuclear transactions, Iran's nuclear intentions, high value targets, along with identifying any key upcoming nuclear exercises and events, such as the nuclear testing planned in September. GeoWint is going to be directed by the NGA and supported by all agencies in order to identify high value targets for continued monitoring. Outputs of NGA will include nuclear missile locations, the amounts of missiles equipped by Iran, and the movement of those missiles in order to provide indicators of whether or not Iran would be taking an offensive or defensive posture against the United States. Human, directed by the CIA, will be supported by the FBI for domestic human collection operations and supported by the Department of State and DIA. Those two particular agencies will be conducting overt human collection operations such as foreign diplomats, military leaders, etc., while the CIA will be conducting more secretive, clandestine human collection operations. Their outputs will also produce high value targets, locations of missiles, important exercises and events, and most importantly, understanding the intentions of Iran. SIGINT will be directed by NSA and directly supported by the NRO for satellite imagery. Outputs of SIGINT will include geolocations, high value targets, movements of particular nuclear missiles, along with assessing their capabilities, and you know, through encrypted transmissions, identifying other key intelligence relevant to the intelligence requirements. MASINT will be directed by the DIA, supported by the NGA and NSA, and that will be a more technical scientific discipline that will also provide the nuclear missile locations, capabilities, movements, and amount equipped by the Iran government. So, moving into evaluating reporting. So I think there should be at least 5 structured analytical techniques that is followed strictly by the task force. These techniques include pre-mortem assessment, deception detection, social network analysis, red hat analysis, and indicators. Pre-mortem is going to focus on uh, formalizing key judgments and recommendations prior to consensus for moving forward in the intelligence collection plan. It's going to be, most dangerous course of action, what's the impact of XYZ. Deception, in the event that Iran is purposely deceiving intelligence collection assets. Deception techniques will identify whether or not evidence is credible and divert major resources from being used improperly and, challenging key assumptions. Social network analysis, that's pretty much connecting the dots of groups, individuals, and other organizations related to Iran nuclear weapon development. Red hat analysis, we want to take our analysts on the task force, put them, and collectors as well, to put them in the mindset of Iran to better understand what the best areas and targets are for collection. And lastly, indicators are going to be used for tracking events, emerging nuclear trends, and also providing missile warnings in the event that Iran takes an offensive state towards the US. So, in conclusion, I went over the 5 stages of the intelligence collection plan, starting with receiving the mission, going over the logistical planning of the operation, tasking particular resources and assets and evaluating data that is collected and then pushed up towards the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Most importantly, in the last step, which is updating the collection planning, because remember, the intelligence collection plan is a fluid process that feeds into the intelligence cycle directly and after the collection step, which goes into their process and exploitation. Most importantly, we want to supervise and refine our intelligence collection plan, which means that after the task force analyzes collected information, we and ODNI receives it, we may receive new intelligence requirements. We may modify pre-existing intelligence requirements, and then the cycle will start all over again, which goes back into the receiving and analyzing intelligence requirements. So I look forward to hearing from you all, and please make sure to reference the below PowerPoint slides to follow along.